live. We are live on, we're live on Facebook. I'm live on Facebook, YouTube, and it looks like Instagram. Having issues with Twitter, but I'll post it there later. It is Veterans Day, and I am very happy to talk to one of the best leaders of our generation of veterans. She is the CEO of Iraq and Afghanistan Veterans of America. She is a veteran of the Iraq War. She's had an amazing career in leadership, and I saw her the other night because I was honored to host the IAVA Gala in New York City. She is one of my favorite people. She's a mentor. She's a friend. I'll do anything she ever tells me. But luckily, she did something I asked her and joined me today. Give it up for Allison Jaslow. You hear the crowd. There's millions watching you. Allison, thank you so much for joining me on Veterans Day. I know how busy you are, and I'm super grateful and thank you to have you stopping in just for a few minutes to answer a few questions about why this day matters and your organization does.
Well, thank you for having me, Pete, and thank you for also helping us host a wonderful Heroes Gala in New York City last week. As you know all too well, to fuel a mission of an organization like ours, you have to have successful fundraising events. And so everyone left inspired and feeling really great about the vibe in the room. And that was in large part thanks to your leadership as MC.
Do you think General Petraeus is upset with me for my jokes about his skincare regime?
I don't think so, but I think it's great that he gave you his business card.
Yeah, that was the one sign that I knew he wasn't going to have me killed. He was really cool and a class act, and I appreciated him, the way he conducted himself and the work that he's done in retirement, I guess. So, all right, let's get into important issues for veterans and your organizations. But
Sure.
before I do, I was really shocked to learn many years ago that, of course, we have an all-volunteer army. There's no compulsory service like there are in other countries nowadays, like there was in our country at times with the draft.
Mm-hmm.
It's 99% of us don't obviously serve. You did. Why did you join the United States Army and when?
Well, I went to school on an ROTC scholarship in the fall of 2000. So, as you know, my sophomore year of college, the trajectory of my service fundamentally changed. But I found myself on that path because I'm the only success story of Career Day that I know. I got voluntold to go to Fort Myer, which is the military base that is connected to Arlington National Cemetery, when I was 13, and wanted to go a lot of other places that I were told were fun or you got some free stuff. But Fort Myer is a very ceremonial base, and the pageantry there really swept me off my feet. And so from that point on, the Army was my dream. I would have gone on an ROTC scholarship, but I also would have enlisted and met with a recruiter, but ended up, on an ROTC scholarship the fall of 2000, was sworn in May of 2004, and found myself on a plane to Iraq the day after Thanksgiving in 2004. Served for 4 years, got out in 2008, and then had some wild and crazy adventures ever since.
Tell me about your service and something that you take away from it, learn from. I bet you you're going to say something like, "Oh, every day I think of this about my service." I'm sure a lot of it is instilled and ingrained in you and most who served. So, what did you learn from what did you learn from your time in Iraq? I mean, you saw combat, didn't you?
I mean, I was in a combat zone and I was doing convoy security where there were, IEDs hitting some of the convoys that I was on, and definitely small arms fire. I think a couple of things. I think not just being a veteran, but a combat veteran gives you immense perspective on life. I tell people all the time, the way Americans were acting during the pandemic, I think most of my fellow Americans would not be able to handle a deployment, let alone, even the dangerous part of being at war, but just the deployment, just being, even if you stayed on a base the entire time, without your support network, without modern conveniences, having to put a mission, and other people's needs and, priorities that were set beyond what you wanted to set for yourself above your own. But I think, it really gives you life perspective at a very young age. And we all know that not everybody endured that experience the way that maybe I did. But it gives you a lot of perspective at a very young age that I think has served me well throughout life. And then I would say that there are two things that I picked up via the Army that really are core to who I am ever since. As somebody who's also sought to serve my fellow Americans in public service ever since, whether it's what I'm doing today on behalf of my fellow veterans or some of the other roles that I've had. But the first is mission first, people always. And that really is sort of a North Star for me. And then the Army has what they call the Army values. They spell leadership, loyalty, duty, respect, selfless service, integrity, and personal courage. And I may have left the Army, but those are values that really, I think, define not only who I am, but who I aspire to be, even though I'm not wearing the uniform anymore. And I think
Mm.
what I try to do is, and you know this about my background, I've had a background in politics too. And like, perhaps if we had more of the Army values in our politics right now, it would feel a little more pleasant, right? But I can only control what I can control. And so that's just, sort of the way that I've tried to walk through life ever since.
It's funny because as I know you really well, we become good friends. You become a really important mentor in my life. I guess it made me think for the first time when you were just talking that I like to have mentors and people in my life who can help me and make me a better person. And you've done so much of that. And I do think a lot of it is because of what you learned serving in the military and your leadership positions up till now. And my point is find a veteran to be friends with, because whatever they learned in their service, they can impart much of that wisdom on you. You can't obviously replicate it perfectly, but yeah, no, I mean, I had a panic attack this morning when I found out I was out of coffee. So yeah, most of us probably are well suited. I threw the can at the fridge, but it's okay. Everything will be fine. I got more coffee.
Well, the other thing I'd say to the point about perspective too is like for those of us who are combat vets and experience loss during our time overseas, like I've, objectively, I think been through some tough shit at different junctures in my life. And, it's a helpful reminder that as hard as things might be for me at different points in my life, right? Personal challenges, professional challenges, a combination of both at the same time. But I'm one of the lucky ones. I made it back. Unlike my buddy whose stuff I had to pack up and send to his family after he got hit on a convoy. And so, I think it enriches and gives you perspective on some of the other challenges that can come at you in life when essentially get taught that lesson. If you're somebody like myself who learned the lesson at such a formative time in your life, which I was 22, you know?
Sometimes I'll meet veterans from this generation and I'll ask them if they know about IAVA or if they're a member of IAVA. And I'm always happy when they know and are and support your organization, and always like so disappointed when they're like, no, I don't know it. I'm like, you served and you don't know about IAVA. Well, you got to find out about them and join up, sign up. This is an amazing community that has certainly impacted my life. And I'm not even a veteran. How can you be a veteran and not know or not be a member? What is your organization doing? And what are you doing for your members? Why is it pay to be part of your organization?
Well, IAVA, or Iraq and Afghanistan Veterans of America, is the leading voice of the post 9/11 generation of veterans. We also have a catchphrase that you've probably heard before, Pete. We've got your back. What that looks like in the work that we do is we are the leading advocacy organization for our generation of veterans. So we have chalked up win after win on Capitol Hill for things like the post 9/11 generation GI Bill that many post 9/11 vets have now gone to college and gotten multiple degrees on, but had dwindled down to a benefit that couldn't get you much when we started matriculating back into civilian society. IAVA's advocacy and partnership with lawmakers took that benefit and brought it back up to what the World War II generation got when they were leaving service.
Right.
And then, additionally, if you are involved in our organization, which can look like being like one of our numbers, it can also look like participating in research projects that we do that help fuel our advocacy and tell the story of our generation of veterans. But we also have over time, and I'm sure you've seen this, Pete, it used to be called Storm the Hill in the past, but we have IAVA's Cavalry, which is our premier leadership and advocate development program. And so we help Allison Jaslow can be the voice of the post 9/11 generation veterans, and it's certainly a part of my job. But it's way better if I can help invest in veterans understanding, the priorities of our generation, and also helping use their story to advocate on behalf of those priorities is way more effective and way more powerful, especially when we grow in numbers, than I or my staff could ever do all on our own. So that's sort of like the work that fuels the work and allows us to continue to be the leading voice of the post 9/11 generation of veterans, and also an advocacy leader for um, the vets who I am, proud to be a part of in community.
Very well said. And last question for you is about what you're working on, what your priority issues are. You have something called the Big Six: selective service, democracy, repeal AUMFs, Afghan allies, reproductive care access, alternative therapies. What are you looking at moving forward? It's 2024 Veterans Day. What do you want to get done? Your organization has a history of wins for this generation of organizations. What are you hoping to win this year and in the coming years?
Well, stepping back a little bit, I started 2024 believing that the veteran voice needed to be in one of the most important conversations that we're having in this country right now, which is, what is the future of American democracy? What does it look like? What does protecting what we have here in America look like? Where do we have shared values, and where is still some tension that we have to work out? But I think you joined us on the road in this, and vets themselves come at this from very different directions. But I do believe that whether it was in the fall heading up to the election, or whether it's going forward, the veteran voice will still be a powerful voice in that conversation. And so, again, it's a personal goal of mine as the CEO to make sure the veterans' voice is prominent in that conversation and can be a powerful one. Um, but as it relates to some of our other priorities, I would say near term, what is not outlined in our Big Six is the fact that Congress is coming back into town this week. The government is not funded. The National Defense Authorization has not been passed, but needs to every year. And so there's going to be some fury of activity to make sure that not only are programs that the military and veterans community depend on appropriately resourced before the end of the year, and we don't have a government shutdown, but also to make sure, the National Defense Authorization is a really sexy piece of legislation for lawmakers to push their personal political agendas
Right.
and sometimes attack members of our community. And so there's going to be some blocking and tackling needed to be done there. I mentioned beforehand, we have a tagline, we've got your back. And, especially for the most vulnerable or marginalized in our community, like you know, we really need to flex sometimes on their behalf.
Right.
But I'm telling you something you don't already know, that like the landscape is rapidly shifting. If you do, advocacy or awareness around, a community, especially at the intersection of public policy. And so there's going to be a lot that we need to do to make sure that we're taking in the new landscape, and potentially course correcting some of our priorities if need be. But you did mention some of them. I think the reining in the authorizations of military force is important to our community, and is going to continue to be important to our community. These authorizations of military force that were left open-ended after passing to authorize the Afghanistan war and the Iraq war are being exploited, and have been exploited by presidents of both parties. There are troops today deployed to Syria and Iraq under the 2001 authorization of military force that was passed for the Afghanistan war. I don't think, and in fact, I know that many of our members are not unlike me, and they're not doves. They are realists about the threats that we face in this country. They understand that we will have to combat those threats, but they also believe that our lawmakers should be having continuous and thoughtful conversation about where and when we are sending our troops into harm's way, and asking permission to do it, or making the president ask permission to do it. And so that's something that's definitely not going to go away. It's a long fight that's been fought by Senator Tim Kaine and Todd Young, or have been leaders in those fights. It's a bipartisan initiative, and hopefully that will continue to get momentum. And then there are other issues, as you mentioned. Our members are strongly in favor of including women in the selective service. I think most Americans don't want to see the draft come back, but as long as the selective service is in place, there's real inequity in terms of how we are, having options to defend our borders from threats. And And I would argue that equality of opportunity in this country requires equality of sacrifice.
Right.
But yeah, our members are also, I think something we uniquely lead on is alternative therapies. We're the generation that grew up in the opioid crisis. We also are, I'm 42, I'm the median age of our members. Definitely skew more millennial and Gen Z. And we have buddies and or people live in states where cannabis is legalized, and they just want the VA to be able to pay for that and to be able to have access to that as an actual therapy. And then psychedelic assisted therapies is something that is
Yeah.
increasingly of interest of folks who are hearing stories from special operators and others who've suffered multiple deployments and have had real healing power come from psychedelic assisted therapy.
Yeah, no doubt about it. No, I've heard a lot of those anecdotes and the research on them. All right, I'll let you go. I appreciate your time on Veterans Day. It's hilarious to me to find out that you're 6 years younger than me because I always look so up to you, like an older sibling. I was like, what? How could you be that much better and smarter? I don't mean to kiss your ass, but that is the case. I am so happy to have you. And in this leadership role, veterans are all lucky to have you and your team over at IAVA. I hope everybody will go. If you do one thing for Veterans Day, just go to the website, support them or not, favorite it, check in, subscribe to their email, subscribe to them on all socials. The least you can do is subscribe to IAVA on your social media networks. It's literally the least you can do. So go do that now. Thank you, Allison, so much for joining me.
Hey, thank you for having me. And I sincerely mean what I said over text earlier today. Thanks for all you do on behalf of our community. You do way more than your fellow Americans, and it truly matters.
Gives me great purpose for someone who hasn't served. You'll be on the Hill Veteran Voices on Wednesday. People can catch you there. Anything else to plug?
Yep.
Sorry, I meant to do that. Anything else?
No, just remember that what we have here in America comes at a price. And it's those who are willing to step up and volunteer, as you said beforehand, to protect and defend what is so precious and, a birthright for those of us who are so lucky to be born here.
Well said. Thank you so much for joining me. I hope everybody will support IAVA. Thanks, Allison.
Thanks, Pete.